Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're really getting into a huge shift happening in how big companies handle energy.
Yeah, it's a big change. The old ways just aren't cutting it anymore.
Exactly, like those long-term power deals, hedging fuel. Our sources are pretty clear that playbooks, well, broken.
It really is. You've got commodity prices swinging wildly,
Yeah,
plus the risk of fossil fuel assets just becoming worthless.
and the grid itself
Yeah.
sometimes feels like a gamble, doesn't it? So the question really is, how do companies even start to adapt?
And then you add the huge energy needs coming from AI electrification.
Yeah.
It's like a perfect storm.
Reliable, affordable power isn't just nice to have anymore. It's critical,
Yeah.
potential bottleneck.
It's moving way beyond just being a line item on a budget.
Yeah. And you've actually been working on this firsthand, haven't you? Rethinking these
For
strategies.
the past decade, yeah. We've looked at things like AI for monitoring microgrids at places like airports, figuring out ways to fund lithium projects using like royalty cash flows,
Right.
even setting up these storage as yield deals for big investors.
Wow, okay. Storage as yield, that sounds different, like a whole new way of looking at it.
It really is a fundamental shift.
R-
The key idea, is that companies can't just see energy as a cost they have to bear.
Right. Not just something you extract and pay for.
Exactly. They need to look at the whole chain,
Yeah.
from mining the raw materials.
To generating the power, storing it.
Precisely. And see each part, each layer, as a potential source of revenue, not just a drain.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The materials we looked at lay out three kind of interlocking business models.
hmm Three architectures that work together.
Right. First, autonomous extraction, sovereign yield. That's for mining.
Correct. Then there's microgrid sovereignty for the actual power generation bit.
And finally, storage as revenue instrument for the batteries.
That's the one.
It sounds like we're going way past just, trying to save a few bucks on the electricity bill.
Oh, absolutely. The real goal isn't just cost cutting. It's building new, sustainable cash flows, ones that aren't totally dependent on, say, commodity speculation or waiting for the utility regulators.
Okay, let's dive into that first one then. Autonomous extraction, sovereign yield. The question here is, how do the minerals themselves pay for everything else, instead of needing outside cash all the time?
What's interesting, a lot of companies are sitting on huge reserves, lithium, nickel, rare earths.
Just on the balance sheet, not really doing much.
Often, yeah, kind of dormant assets. Meanwhile, you've got all these ESG funds.
Mm.
They want clean energy exposure, right?
Yeah, definitely. But maybe nervous about traditional mining risks?
Exactly. They want the upside without the usual headaches of direct mining investment.
So how do you bridge that gap? Is that where royalty fractionalization fits in?
That's the mechanism. You basically take the mine's future output, the minerals it will produce,
Okay.
and you divide that future production into shares, tradable royalty shares.
Ah, like slicing up the future profits.
Sort of, yeah. You sell these shares to investors who want a steady yield. The mining company gets cash now based on its reserves without taking on debt or selling equity in the actual mine.
That's clever. Turning future rocks into present-day capital. And then there's AI-optimized ore scheduling. What's that about? Using AI to mine smarter?
Pretty much. Instead of just digging up the most tons, you use AI, real-time data,
To find the good stuff.
to find the highest value ore right now, based on detailed grade modeling. It shifts the focus from sheer volume to, let's say, immediate cash return, smart extraction.
Makes sense. And to lock things down further, you mentioned embedded offtake contracts, like pre-selling the minerals to a battery maker.
Exactly. Locking in fixed price deals, maybe with domestic cathode producers, that smooths out the bumps from volatile commodity prices.
Takes a lot of the risk off the table, doesn't it? Predictable revenue.
A huge amount. It makes planning, forecasting
Hmm.
much, much simpler.
Okay, and this is where it gets really neat for me. Treasury recycling, you take the money from selling those royalty shares and you put it directly back in as equity into the power generation, the storage projects that the mine needs anyway.
Precisely. It creates this self-funding loop. The minerals themselves basically seed the whole clean energy setup.
So the resource finances its own infrastructure.
Exactly. The resource owner gets cash up front. The investors get an inflation-protected yield tied to the actual resource. And the downstream projects, the power and storage, they get cheaper capital. Everyone benefits.
There was that example of the Nevada lithium field. It really brings it home.
Yeah, that scenario helps illustrate it.
Selling, what, 40% of future royalties for $180 million? using AI to get more lithium out.
Increasing recovery by 12%, I think it was.
Right. And then using that cash, the royalty cash, to fund their own solar and battery microgrid, which powers the site and a nearby data center park.
And the result? A solid 11% unlevered yield for the investors holding the royalties, and the operator expands without taking on any debt.
So the key insight is really that the mineral itself is the capital source. It bypasses a lot of the usual financing headaches.
That's it exactly. It shows how these assets as reserves can unlock value way beyond just selling them raw on the market.
Okay, great. Let's pivot then. Second architecture, microgrid sovereignty. Here the question seems to be, how do you make reliability, like guaranteed power, something you can sell as a premium service?
Well, that's crucial, isn't it? Because for more and more industries, outages are just catastrophic.
Think about edge computing, EV fleets, cold storage.
Right, cold chain logistics.
Yeah.
You can't afford downtime. Even short interruptions cause huge problems, massive costs.
And traditional utilities, they charge you for the energy you use, the kilowatt hours.
Not for keeping the lights on 24/7, 365. They don't guarantee that uptime.
So the idea here is syndicated microgrids, groups of industrial users getting together to own their own power generation.
Exactly, pooling resources, pooling expertise. Instead of just relying on the main grid, which can be, let's face it, fragile. They build their own dedicated power system, tailored to what they need, gives them way more control, especially over reliability.
And the contracts change too, these performance index contracts. It's not just about how much power, but how reliable it is. Like hitting 4 nines uptime, 99.99%.
That's the idea. Revenue gets tied directly to hitting those performance targets. If the microgrid delivers that super high uptime, it gets paid for it.
Creates a strong incentive to run things really well, though.
Very powerful economic incentive, yeah. For smart operations, good maintenance, robust design, all of it.
Okay, and AI dispatch comes in here too, the brains of the operation.
You could call it that. It's the control system. AI algorithms watching demand in real time, predicting changes.
Based on history, schedules.
Right, and then making smart calls.
Yeah.
Generate more now, store some energy in the batteries for later, or maybe even sell extra power back to the grid if prices are high.
Ah, so it can actually make money by selling surplus?
Definitely.
Yeah.
During peak demand periods, yeah, it's about maximizing all the revenue streams and cutting energy waste. Intelligent automation.
And there's an insurance angle too, an insurance overlay using parametric policies. What does parametric mean there?
Okay, so think of parametric insurance like this. Instead of a long claims process after something bad happens,
Right.
the policy pays out automatically if a specific pre-agreed trigger occurs. So in this case, maybe a power outage lasting longer than, say, 15 minutes.
Ah, okay. A predefined event triggers an automatic payout. Much faster.
Much faster. And the really clever part is how you fund it. The extra money the microgrid makes from having really high uptime.
You use that surplus
To pay the premiums for this insurance. So it's like a built-in financial safety net funded by its own success.
That inland port example was great, with the warehouses, the EV truck depot,
Yeah.
all forming one microgrid LLC.
Yeah, it ties it together well.
They pay a bit more per kilowatt hour for that guaranteed uptime you said, compared to standard wholesale rates.
Slightly more, yes.
Yeah.
But it's still cheaper and way more reliable than firing up diesel backup generators all the time.
Right, and the AI managing it can actually earn back some money by selling power to the ISO, the grid operator, when demand spikes.
Generating an extra, 9% return for the owners? It shows perfectly how reliability itself becomes a valuable service you can sell.
Businesses will pay for that certainty.
They absolutely will. They pay a premium for knowing they can keep operating, and the microgrid captures that value. The difference between those volatile wholesale prices and the premium reliability fee.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, let's tackle the final piece. Storage as revenue instrument. How do we stop thinking about batteries as just expensive equipment that wears out?
Yeah, how do we make them into something that generates a yield, almost like a bond?
Exactly.
Well, this is a really critical shift in thinking, especially for utilities. For so long, batteries were just CapEx, capital expenditure, depreciating assets on the books.
Losing value over 10 years or whatever.
Right, and that mindset completely misses the potential for batteries to earn money by providing services the grid desperately needs.
Okay, so how do you unlock that? First step is dispatch rights leasing. Investors own the batteries, but someone else rents the right to control them.
Pretty much. Think of it like renting the battery's capabilities hour by hour. The investors own the metal box, the physical asset,
Gotcha.
but they lease the decision-making power when to charge, when to discharge to whoever can use that flexibility best. Could it be a utility needing peak power? Could be the grid operator needing stability services?
Yeah, okay, renting the control.
And
Then multi-market stacking. AI, again, letting the battery play in different energy markets all at once.
exactly. A big battery connected to the grid isn't just a one-trick pony. It can do frequency regulation, keeping the grid stable.
Okay.
It can provide reserves backup for unexpected outages.
Yeah.
It can do energy arbitrage, buying low, selling high.
And AI juggles all of that.
AI orchestrates it.
Yeah.
Real-time optimization to squeeze the most revenue out of all those different market opportunities simultaneously.
And what about the fact that batteries wear out? The cycle insurance pools. How does that work?
That's a really smart way to handle degradation. You take a bunch of battery projects, pool insurance premiums from them,
Into a dedicated fund?
into a reserve fund specifically set aside to pay for replacing battery cells down the road when they degrade,
So it turns this big, unpredictable future cost.
into a predictable, manageable, basically priced-in operational expense. It makes the whole investment much more bankable, more reliable financially.
And the last bit, tokenized capacity shares. That sounds like crypto, but for batteries, making it easier for people to invest.
Sort of, yeah. Think of it like a REIT, a real estate investment trust, but for battery capacity.
Ah, okay, fractional ownership.
Exactly. You represent slices of the battery's capacity or its output as digital tokens. These tokens can then be traded easily between institutional investors.
So it makes a traditionally illiquid asset, a big battery project, much more liquid.
Precisely. Investors can buy and sell smaller pieces on a secondary market. That opens the door to a much wider pool of capital, especially investors looking for green, yield-generating assets with clear time horizons.
That example with the private credit fund, investing $100 million in batteries, leasing out the dispatch rights daily,
Auctioning them off to utilities, to the ISO.
generating a 12% average yield, it said. That's pretty impressive.
It is. And the cell life insurance caps the degradation risk. Plus, the tokenization adds liquidity. It makes it a very different kind of investment proposition.
And the key is that the revenue isn't just tied to the price of electricity anymore, right?
That's the crucial point. It's coming from all these services the battery provides to the grid. Frequency response, capacity, arbitrage. It's a much more diversified and, frankly, more stable income stream for the owners.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, it feels like the old ways, the long-term commodity deals, debt-heavy financing, treating storage, like it just appreciates they're really hitting a wall.
They absolutely are. You see the results. Stranded assets, grid failures becoming more common, maybe capital even pulling back from developers who aren't adapting.
The legacy models just aren't built for today's energy world, are they? Too slow, too fragile.
Not agile enough, not resilient enough. They just chip away at profits and add a lot of risk, often risk you can't even easily measure.
But this new integrated vision, using mineral royalties to fund things, selling guaranteed uptime from microgrids, structuring storage to generate yield, that seems like the way forward.
It really does. It's about seeing the connections across that whole energy value chain
Mining, generation, storage.
and building business models that capture value at every single step, intentionally.
And for people listening, maybe operators thinking about this, there's sort of a playbook, right? Valuing your minerals properly, designing those performance contracts carefully.
And definitely thinking about insurance for battery life. Those are key operational points.
And the practical steps, things like actually structuring those royalty deals, getting companies together for microgrid syndicates, figuring out the tech and rules for tokenizing battery rights.
Those are the concrete actions, yes.
Yeah.
How you actually implement these ideas.
So the big takeaway for listeners, especially if you're in a leadership role, it seems like pulling these threads together, mining, power, storage, isn't just about saving on energy costs anymore.
Not at all.
It's about creating new revenue, taking control, gaining a real strategic edge.
It absolutely is. This integrated strategy gives you a buffer, protection from volatile markets, unreliable grids,
You turn an expense.
into a strategic asset, something that generates income, hedges against inflation, attracts investment, fuels growth.
So the message is really, take ownership of your energy future. Start thinking this way now.
Before market swings and grid issues make it incredibly expensive, maybe even impossible to catch up.
Some really powerful ideas to consider there. Thanks so much for walking us through this deep dive.
It was my pleasure. Really enjoyed the conversation.